The most dangerous sentence in hip-hop right now was not rapped. It was not sung. It was not even written down. It was mumbled into a live stream microphone between jewelry flexes, and within 48 hours it had the entire rap game checking over its shoulder. Drake just looked into a camera, flashed 2 chrome bracelets and a diamond cross hanging off his jeans, and told every rapper who has ever said his name sideways one thing: be careful with your reply, because the pen is not dry. And I need everybody to understand what just happened here, because this is not a rapper teasing a verse. This is a man who spent the last 2 years inside a courtroom describing emotional distress, now standing back up in public and telling the entire industry that the artillery is still loaded. Whether that is terrifying or completely delusional is exactly what we are about to spend this video figuring out, because the reaction to this moment has split the internet clean in half. And the side you land on says everything about where you think Drake actually stands in 2026. Now, before we open this whole thing up, if you are rocking with real hip-hop conversation and not the paid propaganda version, do me one favor and tap that like button right now. Every single like tells the algorithm that somebody still wants journalism instead of fan club newsletters, and if you subscribe while you are at it, you are basically casting a vote against every yes man we are about to discuss. Because yes, we are naming names today. All of them. So let me set the table properly, because context is everything with a story like this. A few months back, Drake did something the rap game had never quite seen at that scale. 3 albums. One night. Dropped directly on the industry's forehead with zero warning, and then he vanished. No press run. No apology tour. No sitting across from some friendly interviewer pretending to be humbled. He went completely dark, and while he was gone, the rest of the rap game kept moving. Albums came out. Albums flopped. Rollouts collapsed in real time. And, through all of it, Drake said nothing, which for him might be the loudest thing he has ever done, because silence from the biggest commercial artist of his generation while his enemies publicly stumble is its own kind of statement. Fans noticed. Blogs noticed. And the whole time, one question kept building pressure underneath everything. When Drake finally reemerges, what version of him are we getting? Now we have the answer, and it is not the humble version. It is not the reflective version. It is not the grown man who took his lumps, learned his lessons, and came back focused purely on music. No. The version of Drake that popped back out on live streams this month is the version that wants everybody to know he was watching the entire time. Taking notes. Keeping receipts. And the energy coming off him is not a man returning to joke around with chat and play some unreleased music for the kids. The energy is a man who believes the scoreboard vindicated him while he was away, and who has decided that now is the perfect moment to start collecting debts. He got comfortable on that stream the way he always does, started talking the way he always does, and within minutes the subliminals were flying in every direction like the beef never ended. Like 2024 was just an intermission, and the show was starting back up. And look, part of this is just the Drake livestream experience at this point. We all know the rhythm of it. He sits down, the jewelry comes out, the jokes start flowing, and sooner or later somebody in the industry catches a stray they were not expecting. Fans have learned to watch these streams the way detectives watch interrogation footage, freeze-framing every sentence, cross-referencing every name, building entire theories off half-finished thoughts. That is the culture around this man now, and he knows it, which is why nothing he says on camera is ever truly casual. But this time was different, and I want to walk through exactly why, because the specific words he chose matter more than anything he has said publicly in a long time. While flexing what he described as a Cartier piece your grandmother would wear, while laughing about a price tag he refused to say out loud, Drake slid a sentence into the middle of the luxury talk that landed like a warning shot across the entire genre. He told the camera that he appreciated the last few months, that it had been incredible for him, that he dropped 3 on that head top while these other guys are dropping albums that amount to, in his words, hello and goodbye. And then came the sentence. The one that has been clipped, quoted, debated, and dissected on every platform since. Careful with that reply, he said, because the pen is not dry. I am just letting you know. That is what I am on. Now on the surface, sure, That is a rapper being a rapper. Talking tough is the job description. But hold that thought, because we're going to spend a lot of time on what that sentence actually means in the current climate, who it was aimed at, and why the reaction to it has been so dramatically different from what it would have been just a few years ago. Because there was a time, and it was not that long ago, when Drake telling the rap game that his pen was still loaded would have sent genuine shockwaves through the industry. Radio silence from every camp. Emergency meetings. Rappers quietly deleting drafts. That was the aura this man carried for over a decade, and he is clearly betting that aura still exists. The question hanging over everything now, the question this entire video is built around, is whether he is right. And to answer it honestly, we have to talk about Rick Ross, we have to talk about a courtroom, we have to talk about Jay-Z, and we have to talk about the ugliest album rollout of the year. Because every single one of those threads connects back to this one live stream moment in ways most people have not fully pieced together yet. But before we get to Ross, you need to understand the full architecture of the moment Drake built for himself. Because the 3 albums in one night move is the foundation everything else sits on. When that happened, the initial reaction was pure chaos. Nobody had a framework for it. 3 full projects, no warning, no singles run, no traditional rollout. Just a detonation in the middle of the night and a mushroom cloud of discourse that lasted for weeks. And the genius of it, the part that even his harshest critics had to grudgingly respect, was the strategic vacuum it created. By dropping everything at once and then disappearing, Drake flipped the entire rhythm of how the game covers him. There was nothing left to anticipate. Nothing left to leak. Nothing left to speculate about. He gave the world everything, and then he left, and in his absence every other artist's release became an involuntary comparison. Every flop that happened while he was gone happened in his shadow. Every week rollout was measured against a man who was not even in the room. That is a level of psychological positioning that does not show up on any chart, but it shapes every chart, because the conversation is the real currency of this era and Drake cornered it without saying a word. And while he was gone, the fan mythology did the work for him. This is the part of the Drake machine that no other artist in the genre can replicate, the self-sustaining narrative engine. His supporters spent those months building the case that his recent work was not just music, it was prophecy. They went back through the lyrics, line by line, matching them against real-world events. He rapped about flying economy as the ultimate insult, and then watched his rivals' numbers nosedive like grounded flights. He framed himself as the villain the game needed, and then watched the game scramble to fill the villain vacuum he left behind. He made jokes about missing streams and missing people, and then watched the conversation turn, week after week, into a rolling audit of where everybody else went. Whether you think that is genuine foresight or just fans retrofitting meaning onto vague bars is almost beside the point, because in the attention economy, the perception of prophecy is just as powerful as prophecy itself. By the time Drake finally sat down in front of that live stream camera, the stage had been set for him by his own audience. He did not have to argue that he was winning. He just had to act like a man who already knew. Let us start with the man who caught the most direct stray, because if there was any doubt about who Drake was looking at when he started talking about albums saying hello and goodbye, Rick Ross erased it himself within days. See, Ross just lived through what might be the most painful 2 weeks of his entire career, and the timing could not possibly be worse. His new album, the project he branded around playing the long game, the project that was supposed to re-establish him as a heavyweight, reportedly moved somewhere around 22,000 units in week 1. Then the second week numbers surfaced, and the conversation went from uncomfortable to brutal, because the follow-up week was basically flat, which in today's climate tells you there was no wave building underneath it at all. And before anybody jumps in the comments, yes, I know the defense. Ross himself went public with a streaming report claiming tens of millions of plays across the first 2 weeks, framing the whole thing as a marathon instead of a sprint, insisting there was no fall-off at all. He even cracked the joke himself, saying if he is lying, he is flying economy. Credit where it is due, the man can spin. He has always been able to spin. That is half of the Rick Ross mystique, the ability to stand in the middle of a storm and describe sunshine. But here is the problem he could not spin away. The numbers being reported, even under the most generous interpretation, represent the lowest selling project of his career by an enormous margin. This is not a normal dip. This is not the industry being rough on everybody. This is a career low for an artist who once anchored an entire label empire, and the internet did what the internet does the second blood hits the water. The memes started immediately. The jokes about the tour started immediately, because yes, there is a tour attached to this project, and photos of seating charts began circulating showing oceans of unsold seats, entire sections glowing green on the ticket maps, with reports of desperate buy one get one discounts floating around for a Miami show in his own backyard. His own backyard. Think about that. And then came 50 Cent, because of course 50 Cent came, laughing publicly that Ross sold 2,000 albums, and even though the real figure came back higher than that, the correction did not save anybody. 17,000, 20,000, 22,000, pick your source, they all spell the same word, and that word is catastrophe for an artist of that stature. Now here is where the story stops being about sales and starts being about strategy, because this is the part that should genuinely concern anybody in Ross's corner. While the album was collapsing in real time, where was Ross's energy going? Into interviews. Not interviews about the music, not deep dives into the production or the features or the creative vision, but interviews where Drake's name kept coming up. In one sit-down, he called Drake's new project horrendous. In another, he was doing the bit about playing records with the Drake vocals stripped out, encouraging crowds to sing along to the version without him. And look, I understand the instinct. When your album is drowning, feeding the beef feels like oxygen, because beef clips travel further than album clips in 2026. But there is a dark side to that math, and radio veteran Ebro actually said the quiet part out loud on air. He suggested, flat out, that the algorithm might be working against Ross now, and not by accident. The theory, and Ebro said this with his whole chest, is that when your entire public presence becomes about another artist, especially an artist with that size of fan base, the platforms start associating your content with that artist's shadow. People click on Rick Ross to hear what he says about Drake, not to hear Rick Ross music. The clips that go viral are the disses, not the songs. And slowly, the machine learns that Ross is a commentary topic, not a music destination. Whether you fully buy the algorithm theory or not, the outcome is sitting right in front of us. The beef got all the attention. The album got none of it. And into that exact vacuum walked Drake, livestream camera on, bracelets gleaming, ready to deliver the eulogy. 3 on that head up, he said. These guys are dropping albums like hello and goodbye. He never said the name. He did not have to. Everybody watching knew exactly whose 2-week sales report was being folded into a punchline, and the worst part for Ross is that the joke landed inside a story he helped write. He spent weeks making Drake the headline of his rollout, and Drake waited until the numbers were public, until the tour photos were circulating, until 50 Cent had already taken his victory lap, and then stepped in to deliver one clean line on a stream. No diss record. No rollout. Just a sentence between jewelry talk. That is the part that has Drake fans celebrating like it is a championship parade, because in their eyes this was efficiency. Maximum damage, minimum effort. But hold on, because before we crown anybody, we need to talk about why a huge portion of the culture heard that same sentence and reacted with something Drake's camp never expected. Laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not intimidated laughter. Courtroom laughter. And that is where this story takes its sharpest turn. Here is the uncomfortable truth that Drake's inner circle either cannot see or refuses to say to his face, and, honestly, it raises a question people have been asking for 2 years now. Is there a single person left in that camp who tells this man no? Because from the outside, moments like this are exactly why the yes man conversation never dies. Think about what the pen is not dry line is actually asking the public to feel. It is asking us to picture Drake as the boogeyman again, the hitman with the loaded catalog, the guy whose unreleased vault should keep rappers awake at night. And 2.5 years ago, before everything changed, that image would have worked. Back then, if Drake hinted that responding to him was dangerous, the reaction across the industry would have been genuine anxiety. People would have taken it seriously. Battle lines would have been drawn within hours. But we do not live in that world anymore, and the reason we do not live in that world is documented in legal filings that Drake's own team authored. I need everybody to sit with this for a second, because this is the contradiction at the heart of the entire story. After the Kendrick Lamar battle concluded, we did not hear the untouchable warrior. We heard attorneys. We heard language about impairment of reputation, about personal humiliation, about mental anguish, emotional distress, stress, anxiety, lost earnings. That was not a blogger's description of how the beef felt. That was the official position of Drake's own legal representation, entered into the public record, arguing that what happened to him caused serious documented harm. And the internet, as it always does, kept every receipt, every page, every phrase. So when that same man reappears on a live stream in 2026, flashing jewelry and telling rappers to be careful because the pen is not dry, the culture does not hear a threat anymore. A massive segment of the audience hears a plot hole. The jokes write themselves, and they have been writing themselves all week. Careful with your reply, or what? Another filing? More paperwork? Is the pen not dry, or is the legal pad not dry? I am not saying that to be cruel. I am saying it because that is the actual temperature of the timeline, and pretending otherwise would be lying to you. And this is what makes the whole thing so strategically baffling, because there was a version of this live stream that worked perfectly. Drake could have leaned entirely into the scoreboard. He could have said, plain and simple, the guys who spent 2 years talking about me just watched their albums disappear in a fortnight, and my numbers speak a language theirs cannot. That is it. That is the whole move. Clean, factual, untouchable, because commercially, the gap between Drake and nearly everyone else is still real, and nobody honest denies it. Flexing sales would have been bulletproof. But the moment he dressed the flex up as a threat, the moment it became about what his pen might do to people, he invited every listener to measure that threat against the most public defeat of his career, and that is a measurement he cannot win right now. You cannot control how people receive your words once the context around your name has permanently shifted, and the context around Drake's name shifted more in 24 months than most artists experience in a lifetime. Now, to be completely fair, and I try to be fair even when the story is this messy, there is a real counterargument, and Drake's supporters have been making it loudly all week. Their case goes like this. Look at where every single one of his opponents actually stands right now. Run the checklist. Ross is defending the worst numbers of his career and discounting tickets in his own city. 50 Cent is laughing from the sidelines, but has not made a relevant record in years. Kendrick, depending on whose reporting you believe, has gone so quiet that fans are openly asking where 100 million streams of momentum disappeared to, with one viral line going around saying he guessed he was the villain and then vanished from the board entirely. And, through all of it, Drake dropped 3 projects in one night and still owns the conversation without leaving his house. From that angle, the stream was not delusion. From that angle, it was a man surveying a battlefield where every enemy is either bleeding or missing and simply announcing that he noticed. One fan put it in a way that went viral this week. All of Drake's opposition is basically flying Delta economy right now, while he is the one joking that if he is lying, he is flying economy. That framing, the prophetic framing, the idea that his recent music predicted every downfall we are now watching, has become the gospel in his corner of the internet. And honestly, it is not nothing. The scoreboard argument is the strongest card his side has to play, which is exactly why critics are so frustrated that he did not just play it clean. So now I have to ask you directly, because this is genuinely where the culture is split. Does the scoreboard outweigh the courtroom? Does winning the commercial war erase losing the credibility war? That question is going to run through the rest of this video, so hold your answer, because the Jay-Z layer is about to make everything even stranger, and while we are being honest about the scoreboard, we need to talk about what the scoreboard is doing to the fan bases, because the discourse war running parallel to the music war has become its own spectacle, and it is uglier than anything happening on Wax. Drake supporters have spent this entire week running a victory lap so aggressive it has started to alienate neutral observers. Every Ross clip, every empty seat photo, Every recycled joke about flying economy is being deployed like artillery, and the message underneath all of it is the same. Everyone who stood against our guy is down horrendous. And every lyric he ever aimed at them aged like a court transcript. There is a viral framing making the rounds right now that calls his recent project prophetic, the idea that every single person mentioned on it is currently living out the exact downfall the bars described. And you can roll your eyes at the theology of it all, but here is what you cannot roll your eyes at: the engagement numbers. That framing is winning. It is dominating timelines, it is drowning out counterarguments, and it is converting casual listeners into believers one clip at a time. Propaganda does not need to be true to be effective. It only needs to be repeated with confidence, and nobody in this genre repeats anything with more confidence than that fan base when they smell momentum. But the other side is not dead, and I need to say this clearly before the comment section accuses me of carrying water for anybody. The anti-Drake coalition has one card left, and it is the strongest card in the entire deck. It is the memory card. They remember the courtroom. They remember the filings. They remember the language about anguish and distress, and they have decided, as a bloc, that no amount of commercial dominance will ever make the tough talk land again. To them, the pen is not dry line, is not a threat. It is a punchline with a price tag attached, a luxury brand version of a bluff that was already called at the highest possible stakes. And the most telling thing about this entire week is that both of these readings of the same 5 words are completely sincere. Half the culture heard a king reclaiming his throne. The other half heard a man daring the world to bring up the one thing he cannot outrun. That split, that razor-thin divide right down the middle of the audience, is the most valuable real estate in hip-hop right now, and every artist named in this video is fighting over it whether they admit it or not. So if you are still here, lock in. Because the question that decides everything is coming, and it is bigger than Drake, bigger than Ross, bigger than any single name on the board, because Rick Ross was not the only name floating above that live stream. And this is where the situation graduates from messy to genuinely fascinating. Within hours of the stream clips circulating, a second theory took over the discussion entirely, and this one has nothing to do with album sales. A growing number of listeners walked away from that broadcast convinced that somewhere inside the jokes and the jewelry talk, Drake was also sending smoke in the direction of Jay-Z and the Rock Nation machine. Now let me be extremely careful here, because this channel deals in what we can support, not in what the group chat wants to believe. Nobody can confirm there is a real problem between Drake and Jay-Z. Nobody outside those rooms knows what is said in private. And I will go further than most channels on this. The idea that 2 of the sharpest writers in the history of the genre would be at war and hide it inside half-decoded mumbles does not hold up to serious scrutiny. If Jay and Drake ever truly had a public issue, history tells us it would not require forensic analysis to find it. These are 2 men who know precisely how to aim a bar so the target cannot pretend to miss it. That much is true. But here is what is also true. And I am not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. Drake has a long documented habit of keeping speculation alive on purpose. He name-checks the orbit without touching the center. He references the machine without naming the man. And his fanbase has spent months building an entire theory of everything around perceived Jay-Z shots, cataloging every lyric, every cadence, every suspicious pause like they are working a cold case. Every new jab, real or imagined, resets the same countdown clock. How long does HOV stay silent? And that question is not nothing, because Jay-Z is not some rookie getting tested by the new class. This is a man with one of the most battle-tested resumes the genre has ever produced. A man who answered pressure on wax at the highest possible level when the stakes were real. So when Drake moves like this, when he floats back into public view throwing multi-directional smoke, the audience is no longer just watching Drake. They're watching the whole board. They're watching Ross respond or fold. They're watching Kendrick's silence for cracks. And they're watching Jay-Z the way you watch a sleeping giant, knowing that if he ever does decide the noise is worth answering, everything changes overnight. And the wildest part, the part that tells you how completely the power dynamic has scrambled, is how people are joking about it. There was a bit flying around all week imagining Jay getting the news, sitting up, telling Beyoncé to comb his hair out because he has to go address this Drake situation, grabbing the helmet because it is wartime, and then immediately climbing back into whatever mansion-shaped hole he crawled out of. That joke exists, and it travels, and it gets hundreds of thousands of engagements, because the public genuinely cannot decide whether Jay-Z ignoring Drake forever is the ultimate power move or the ultimate admission that the old lion does not want the smoke anymore. Both readings are out there. Both have armies behind them. And Drake, to his credit or his discredit, depending on where you stand, seems perfectly comfortable feeding the ambiguity. He is testing the perimeter, seeing how far the smoke can travel before somebody with real stature decides to answer. That is either masterful psychological warfare or a man poking at cages he cannot afford to open, and the terrifying truth is that we will not know which one it is until somebody finally pokes back on wax, and since we are keeping score honestly, let us run the full board, because the carnage extends well past Ross, and the pattern is what makes the Drake side of this argument so loud right now. Start with the tour situation, because the tour might be the single most devastating data point in this entire story. Album sales can be debated, spun, reframed with streaming reports and long-game talk. A seating chart cannot. When photos circulate showing a venue in Miami, Ross's own home market, the city where his mythology was born, glowing green with unsold seats days before showtime, that is not a narrative problem. That is a demand problem. And when the reported fix is a buy one get one discount on tickets to see a self-proclaimed boss, the jokes do not just write themselves, they publish themselves, they chart themselves. That image, that map of empty green dots, did more damage to the Rick Ross brand in one afternoon than any diss record could have, because it converted the whole album debate into a single shareable picture, and pictures do not care about your streaming report. Then there's the 50 Cent dimension, which deserves its own paragraph because that rivalry is the longest-running Cold War in the genre and it never truly sleeps. 50 did not even need to make music to land a shot. He just needed the first week number to be low enough to laugh at, and it was, and he did, publicly, immediately, with the kind of joy that only a decade-long grudge can produce. And notice what that means for Ross structurally. The same bad week fed two separate enemies on two separate fronts. Every sales update was ammunition for Drake's fans and for 50's fans simultaneously. That is the nightmare scenario for any artist when your failure becomes communal property, when two massive fan bases that agree on absolutely nothing find common ground in clowning you. And it raises the strategic question that hangs over Ross's entire year. Why feed both fires at once? Why spend your album window trading shots with Drake while 50 is standing right there waiting for any opening? Some fans have a theory, and it is a brutal one, that the beef talk was never really strategy at all, that it was a reflex, the only move left in the bag once the music was not generating its own gravity. I am not co-signing that fully, but I am putting it on the table, because the results are the results, and the results say the conversation was about everything except the album. And then there is the silence on the other side of the board, the Kendrick question, which is the strangest piece of this entire puzzle. Because depending on which corner of the internet you live in, Kendrick Lamar's current quiet is either the calm of a man who already won the war and has nothing left to prove, or the disappearance of an artist whose momentum evaporated faster than anybody will admit. The Drake side has turned that absence into a weapon, pointing at it constantly, asking where the energy went, asking why the guy who supposedly ended everything is nowhere to be found while the guy he supposedly ended is on live streams collecting scalps. And the one line from Drake's catalog that keeps surfacing in this debate, the one about 100 million streams going missing and nobody asking questions, has become a kind of shorthand for the whole argument. Is it fair? That depends entirely on what Kendrick does next, because silence in this game is alone, and eventually it comes due. If he returns with something undeniable, every one of these jokes ages into embarrassment overnight. If the quiet stretches on, the narrative hardens. That is the knife's edge the whole genre is balanced on right now, and Drake knows it, which is exactly why he chose this precise moment, with Ross wounded, 50 laughing, Kendrick quiet, and Jay-Z sealed in his tower, to remind everybody that his pen never left the table. And that brings us to the layer of this story that almost nobody covering it wants to touch, because it implicates the people doing the covering. The media ecosystem around this beef has completely lost the plot, and I am including some names I used to respect in that statement. Hip-hop media right now does not know what it is. Half the space spent 2 years building entire careers on Drake's downfall, and now that the man is back on top of the commercial mountain, they do not know whether to keep swinging, start quietly apologizing, or pivot to pretending they were neutral the whole time. You can watch it happen in real time. Commentators who built audiences on one narrative are now tying themselves in knots trying to explain why the numbers do not match the story they sold. And meanwhile, the artists themselves keep feeding the machine, because both sides have learned the same ugly lesson. In 2026, conflict is distribution. A disc gets 10 times the reach of a single. A beef clip outsells a rollout. Ross called a #1 album horrendous on camera, and that clip did more numbers than most of his actual songs. Drake noticed. Of course Drake noticed. That is why the live stream exists in the form it does. He is not just talking to rappers anymore. He is talking to the algorithm, and the algorithm speaks one language: engagement at any cost. Now, in fairness to Ross one more time before we close this out, there is a serious case that none of this actually destroys him, and it deserves to be heard instead of memed. The man diversified years ago. The touring will come, because catalog acts with his depth of hits do not starve. The licensing money from 2 decades of records does not evaporate because one project underperformed. The car show keeps running. The businesses keep running. When you never put all your eggs in the music basket, a flop stings your pride far more than your pockets, and Ross has more revenue streams than half the genre combined. Some of the smarter voices in the conversation have been making exactly this point, and they are right to make it. But here is the counter that nobody has a good answer for. Money was never the metric Ross himself chose. He is the one who built his identity on being the biggest boss. He is the one who framed this album as the long game. You do not get to wave the heavyweight belt around for 15 years and then, the first time the belt looks heavy, pivot to talking about your portfolio. The culture does not grade on assets. It grades on moments, and this moment belongs to the man on the live stream, for better or worse. So let me bring this all the way home, because everything we have covered tonight actually collapses into one single question, and it is the question that will decide how the next year of this war plays out. Can you be the boogeyman and the plaintiff at the same time? That is it. That is the entire ballgame. Drake is asking the culture to hold 2 images of him simultaneously. The man so feared that a single sentence on a live stream should freeze the genre, and the man so harmed by the last battle that his lawyers cataloged the damage in legal documents. One of those images has to give. They cannot both be true in the court of public opinion, no matter how many albums drop in one night, no matter how wide the commercial gap stays, no matter how badly Ross fumbled the bag, or how long Kendrick stays missing, or how deep Jay-Z buries himself in silence. Numbers can prove dominance. Numbers cannot restore aura. Aura is granted by the crowd, and right now the crowd is split down the middle, half of them terrified of the pen, half of them laughing at the legal pad, and every move every artist makes from this point forward is a bid to win that crowd for good. The pen is not dry. Fine. But in 2026, ink is not the only thing that writes legacies. Receipts do. And everybody in this story is holding receipts on everybody else, which means the next chapter, whenever it drops, will not be written by any of them. It will be written by us, the audience, choosing which version of the truth we decide to believe. And now I am handing it to you, because this is one of those stories where the comment section is the real battleground. Do you think Drake has earned the right to talk like the boogeyman again based purely on the scoreboard? Or does the courtroom paperwork make every threat sound hollow no matter how many units he moves? Was the Ross line a surgical strike or a victory lap over a man who is already down? And the big one, the one I will be reading every single answer to, if Jay-Z genuinely believes smoke was sent his way, does he respond on a record, or is permanent silence the coldest possible answer? Drop your take below and do not hold back. If you made it this far, hit that like button, subscribe if you have not, and share this with one person who has been following this whole saga, because the next domino in this story is already wobbling, and when it falls, you are going to want to be here. I will catch you on the next one.